Wondering how much a diesel mechanic job pays to do stuff like this all day? Well, in this video, we're going to be discussing how much diesel mechanics and techs make. Hey guys, Josh with the Adept Ape channel, and in this video, we are going to be talking about how much do diesel mechanics make? How much do diesel technicians make? And mechanic, technician, same thing for the most part. Now, I'm going to be talking about how much I make and how much I have made. I'm also going to be talking about the earning potential of this career and all of the various different types of diesel jobs that are out there, the pay scales, different parts of the country, and really going to get into the weeds on this. I've done other diesel videos talking about the job, but I've never focused one on just the pay. So this one's going to be on what I consider the most important part of your job, your compensation, your pay. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's talk about the pay scale here. Start things off, I am a diesel mechanic. I've been doing it for over a decade, and I've always worked for one particular company, Caterpillar. Now, I've worked in different departments within Caterpillar. I've worked on truck engines, and that's what I focus on now, and I've also worked on electric power generation. I've been a shop mechanic, it's currently what I am, and I have been a field mechanic when I was in power generation. And the pay can vary, of course, if you're in the field or in the shop, but the pay for me has been good. And when I first started, it wasn't so good, so we're going to talk about that. When I started, I was only making about 12 bucks an hour. Now, I was very young at this time. I was less than the drinking age here in the U.S. And starting off, I wasn't making much more than my last job, which was working for a large, we'll say very orange-colored home improvement store. Now, when I started my job, they were giving very good pay increases, and this was when the economy was very good with the housing market in the mid-2000s, and they were giving $2 raises every 6 months, as long as your reviews were good. Now, once the economy dipped, they stopped giving those pay raises, and I still stayed with the company, and over time, my pay just steadily increased. Now, I'm not going to say exactly what I make, but I make in the mid to high 30s an hour. Now, I don't get much overtime, but I have worked lots of overtime in the past, and I don't really like working tons of overtime. I have a fairly large family, and I don't like being away from them all the time. Also, I prefer being in the shop. I don't prefer to be out in the field. A lot of guys prefer to be out in the field. A lot of guys prefer to be in the shop. So you may not know which one you want to do until you've done both. I've done both, and I'm going to tell you I prefer being in the shop. Now, that pay is very good, I would say, and that is over the industry standard for my job, but I've been at it for a while, and I've stayed with one company for a while. I'm going to talk about next what the standards are for the industry as far as pay go. I'm going to talk about what you can look at as far as where you live, what industry you're in, because diesel is not just trucks, it's not just earth moving equipment. There's mining, there's oil and gas field, there's shipping with boats, there's tons of different fields. So let's get into breaking apart different pay for these different jobs. Now I'm going to be showing you a bunch of different statistics here, and a lot of them I got from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and some I got from different recruiting websites I found online. Also, I'm going to be telling you some personal anecdotes from lots of guys I've worked with who have worked for different companies. Cummins, Freightliner, Arnold Machinery. Some have worked for different mines. Some have worked for shipping, power generation, pretty much all the different industries out there, okay? So let's get into the statistics, and I'll talk about what you need to know about those. So this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and this is a general overview of the field for diesel service techs and mechanics. And you can see the average pay is $46,360, or about $22.50 per hour. You can notice that you basically just need a high school diploma usually to start off, and the pay is not bad. $46,360, that's pretty close to $50,000 a year. Now remember, Starting out, you're probably going to make less than that, and if you've been at it for a while, you're probably going to make a good percentage more than that, and also if you're doing a lot of overtime. Now notice also there's almost 300,000 of these jobs in 2016, which is the latest info I could find. Now this is an interesting graph. This is broken apart by state for the jobs. Now notice it's ranked from highest to lowest of the top 5, and Alaska pays the most, and a lot of that has to do with the industries there. They have the petroleum industry, they have shipping, and a lot of mining. So you can make a lot more. Look at that, 65,000 per year, and that's the average. Next is Hawaii, DC, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. And a lot of those have to do with standard of living. If you live in an area that has a high standard of living or cost of living, your pay is usually going to be a little higher. Now the next one's going to be, this is the states with the highest amount of these jobs, not the highest pay. Notice it's Texas, California, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida. A lot of it has to do with just the population size of that state. Now, of course, you'd think California might be the highest, but Texas has a lot more diesel industry jobs just because of what they do in Texas. So this is an interesting graph I got from, I believe it was ZipRecruiter. It's a recruiting website. And notice this is broken apart by a specific industry, oil and gas. So the petroleum industry, as a field technician, the average, national average is $73,600 per year. That's a lot. That's a lot more than the $46,000 national average. Now, I also got this from a recruiting website, and this is for, they lumped operators and miners and techs all together, but this is for mining. In particularly, underground mining pays the most. You can make $85,000 average, but you can make well into the six figures, up to $165,000 average as an underground mine technician or mechanic. So keep that in mind if you're looking at just making the most amount of money. You probably don't want to just be in the trucking industry. So as you can see from those statistics, there's a lot of variability in the pay for diesel mechanics based on where you live in the country, what field you're in, how many years experience you have. And I'm going to give you a few personal anecdotes from people I've worked with. And I've worked with a lot of different guys, a lot of great guys through the years, and for the most part, if you want to make the most in this field, you're usually going to have to work in the field. Now, what do I mean by that? Field mechanics typically make more in general. And the reason for that is a lot of companies will pay you a field differential. That can be $1, $2, $3 more an hour. But over a year, that makes a big difference. You have to remember every dollar you make more per hour is about $2,000 more per year in earnings. That's because you work usually about 2,000 hours a year. Now, if you're getting lots of overtime, and I've found that usually if you're getting a lot of overtime, you're also going to be in the field, depending, of course, on which shop you're in. Maybe the shop's extremely busy and you're working a lot of overtime in that shop. And, of course, you're going to make a lot more doing overtime because, at least in the U.S., you're going to make 50% more per hour for hours worked overtime. Now, guy that works with me in the shop right now, he used to work as a field mechanic for mines and earth moving equipment. And he worked on engines and hydraulic systems. And he was making in the mid-40s an hour. And he said he always tried to hit 100 hours per week. Now, he said that's almost impossible. So he'd usually hit about 80 or 90 per week. That's a lot of time. He was definitely making over $100,000 a year easily. Now, of course, he didn't have a lot of time, free time that is, to spend that money. But just goes to show you, depending on if you are looking to make a ton of money in this field, you can definitely do that. Now, if your focus is going to be making the most money, you're most likely going to want to work for a mine or an oil and gas industry. They typically have the highest pay. Now, of course, there's downsides to this. Usually, you're going to have to live in a middle of the nowhere type scenario if you're going to be working for a mine or in an oil and gas field environment, or you're going to have to travel a lot to get to them. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, what if you are more like me? You want to work in a shop, but you still want to make good money. Well, you can definitely do that. And of course, the trick is to make yourself the most valuable person in the shop. Best way in general to do that is to try to be the most knowledgeable person there and try to have the least amount of comebacks. And now if it's a flat rate shop, meaning you don't get paid strictly hourly, you get paid per the job, a set amount of money, you're going to have to try and be as quick as possible. But you don't want to go too quick, or maybe you'll start getting comebacks, and not such a good idea. Now, one thing to know is many shops have what they call a lead position. That's what I am. So usually it's going to be the most senior guy, the most knowledgeable guy. And you might be thinking, well, you look fairly young. That's true, but the seniority in our shop goes by how long you've been there, and I've been there the longest. So the lead guy, at least at our company, gives you a couple dollars more per hour. So even though you're doing the same job you were doing before, being the lead, you get a little bit more, I wouldn't say management decision making. You're just doing more of a supervisory role and still being a mechanic, but you're getting better compensated for that. So that's one way, if you're going to stay in a shop and try to make the most, you can try to bump up your earnings. Now, of course, that's going to mean that you're probably going to have to stay with one company for longer, and hopefully you enjoy working for that company, which I do. Now, if you plan on being with one company for a long time, you might think, well, maybe I don't want to be a mechanic that whole time. Maybe I might want to move into management. Well, most diesel mechanic jobs will pay you more than the lower level management, especially if you're getting overtime. Lower level management jobs are usually salary, which means even though they're going to be there a lot, they're not going to make as much. Also, they're not going to get overtime. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Sometimes you can get trapped in this job if you get used to making so much money, because it's hard to get out and make the same amount unless you get into middle management, or if you go into sales or something else where they can make a commission and make also a very good amount of money. But we're going to be focusing on diesel mechanics in this video in particular. I'm not going to try and branch out and tell you how much the parts guy makes and how much the delivery guy makes. So let's focus on the mechanic portion. Okay, so the pay's great. If you like doing it, it's a job you can do for a while, easily into your 50s as long as you're healthy. And so what are the downsides? Well, the downsides are it can be hard to start in this field, because when you're starting out, you're going to be making less than the average wage. Pretty much every guy is going to do that. Also, you're going to be the least knowledgeable, and you're going to have the biggest learning curve, which means you're usually going to make the most mistakes starting out, and you're probably not going to be offered as much overtime as the other guys. But stick with it, and you will move up and make more money. Now, the other downside of this job is, especially in the beginning, you're going to be spending more on tooling, at least I did initially, and as you get further and further into your career, I spent less and less money on tooling, because you don't need to keep buying a 9/16 wrench every year. All the base tools you already own. So you're not going to, as your pay increases, your tool expenses will usually decrease over time. You'll always be buying some tooling, but it will taper off the longer you're in the career. Now, even though the tooling expenses are relatively heavy starting out, you usually don't need to go to a lot of schooling to start off in this field. Many of the guys I know didn't go to any sort of trade school, and at least for working for Caterpillar, you don't need to. If you went to UTI or Wyotech or a local college, that's good to get your foot in the door, but for the most part in this field, they want years of experience more than just a certificate saying that you passed a course. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you are going to think about going to a tech school, I would say try to keep it local, and you're going to save a lot of money opposed to going to one of the for-profit schools in general. Hope you enjoyed the video and you learned a little bit. All right, thanks for watching.